We are discussing politics, and this time we are going to take it beyond our borders. Now, U.S. President and Democratic contender Joe Biden dropped out from the presidential race. Many Democrats backed the United States Vice President Kamala Harris to face it off with Republican Donald Trump. Social commentator Sam Kaupirura now joins us in studio to give us an analysis on this new development. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Sam.
Thanks for having me, and good day.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your reaction, brother, first, before we delve into it. How did you react to, learning that Joe Biden has stepped down as presidential candidate of the United States?
Well, I think essentially one needs to appreciate the fact that it was not intended. Yeah. It was not by design. He really truly meant to stay in the race and to give Donald Trump a run for his money. But clearly conditions stand against him. His age factor, his cognitive abilities, his what was perceived as a literally subpar performance in the first debate against Donald Trump, his recent health issues strengthened the words within the Democratic Party and his funders to say perhaps it was time to step aside, to not to drag the party down with him.
And of course, now the famous saying, or rather what's more popular on why people actually are making him or made it known that he stepped down is that many critics have been saying that the statement is too old and he needs to step down. But you come to Africa, people say that the older are wiser.
Yes.
What's your saying to that?
So I think the African political establishment in general values the wisdom that comes with age. Right. It values tested stability. It also values a degree of predictability. It's not always the best for the continent, but there are some leaders who have aged, but who had actually left good tracks behind. There were others who have actually poor performed.
You're right. Yeah. And if you take a look at the timing, brother, look at the confidence Joe Biden had during, of course, his, the presidential debate that he just recently hosted before we heard of the news of him stepping out. What do you make of that time of him giving his giving his debate versus the news that we have now?
Yeah, I think his performance overall was quite wanting. You could see that he's quite well versed in the issues. Yeah. He knew, but I think his physical ability pretty much compromised him. And I think that was a serious red flag within the Democratic Party establishment. It's sort of dawned to them to say this was a time to actually draw a line in the sand if they wanted to revitalize their party. And yes, clearly age did take its toll on him. His cognitive ability started dropping him. And leading the world's largest economy, the world leader, well, we can talk about the validity of the statement later, requires a revitalized and energized leader.
It's now Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris.
Well,
what do you see? What do you foresee things turning out between the two?
Well, firstly, Kamala Harris needs to overcome the hurdle of becoming the official nominee of the Democratic Party, which will hopefully happen at the Democratic Party convention in August. Okay. I won't be surprised if there are other contenders also who would give a run for her money. So clearly, if she then goes through that convention and she emerges, then clearly it's going to be to pitch her against Donald Trump. And then the show will be on.
But let's talk about Kamala Harris a bit more. Let's talk about, she being vice president in terms of her political stance, her strength, and her qualities. What can you tell us about her that, perhaps can qualify or not qualify as the right president for the United States in the next election?
Well, she's been a career attorney. In the States, she rose up to the rank of, I think, district attorney general of one of the states in the U.S. I think she has crafted her own profile on her own terms. I don't particularly characterize her as a weak leader. I don't think she's had the exposure to pretty much excel a lot. Yeah. But I think overall, if I was to sort of rank her, yes, I would make her a match for Donald Trump. I would expect her to actually rise and shine.
Absolutely. Another thing is perhaps also her popularity, having been seen with with a lot of celebrities and a lot of popular people, of course. Do you think that can perhaps also have influence, or she can bring some influence towards the elections, of course, perhaps see if she can win the next election?
Yes, obviously she rose through the Democratic Party. She's exposed to the hierarchy of power. She understands the nature of politics. She understands the blend between the economy and politics, of the leader of the free world, so to say. So she does have the caliber and quality. She's now getting the platform to actually bring that forth. And that's a challenge. Is she going to rise and shine?
Let's talk about Donald Trump and, of course, the event that just happened now and his reaction to, of course, the news of Donald Trump rising. Does he feel that Kamala can also perhaps put up a good contest against him, and also his reaction to just what recently happened? What do you make of that?
I think first and foremost, Donald Trump will try and make mincemeat of the fact that the sitting U.S. president had to back out of the race because he's becoming frail. That's not good news for the Democratic Party as a whole. Number two, she would probably consider Kamala Harris as a weak link, and he's going to rely on his bullying tactics to really test her, and she's got to stand that.
And what campaign strategies do you think Kamala Harris should adopt to, unite the party and, of course, also appeal for a broad base of voters? Yeah.
So she sits with two strong constituencies in the party. She sits with the progressives within the Democratic Party. Then she sits with the moderates, and those relate around policy areas such as clean energy, healthcare, the economy, international geopolitics. So these two voices will continue sort of shouting to her. And she's got to blend them, she's got to segregate them when it's necessary, and she's got to establish her own position around these two constituencies.
We understand, of course, that also race can also become a factor in, of course, also influencing the voters as well. Of course, she being black and also Asian, I understand, or something in that line. But what do you think, what's your say on that, and perhaps the influence that it could have on voters?
Yes, it is a clear factor, especially in U.S. politics. It does come to the fore. We've seen it with Barack Obama, his citizenship being questioned and so many things simply because he was a person with color, as the Americans would call it. But I think if I analyze the American voting constituency, there's a generation of new voters, younger, more contemporary voters who may not necessarily sync with a traditional candidate. And I think it would be a serious niche for her to tap into that new constituency. So I think she has a real opportunity to give this opportunity a good go. She might just excel at it, especially against a candidate like Donald Trump, who will be bullying her all the way through to the elections in November. She can be sure about it.
Okay. And if you talk about some of the challenges that she is likely to face up in the race as president, if it's confirmed later in August, what are some of the challenges she's likely to face during her presidential race? So
the first one would be barriers around stigma. She would still be considered a weakling, being a lady and a woman of color for that matter. So she would have to overcome that because there's that systemic barrier. She must strongly assert her space and mark her territory. She needs to clearly articulate her stance on critical policy issues in the U.S. that resonate with American voters: the economy, international conflicts, healthcare, how she's going to unite the country post the elections. She's got to be pretty solid and clear on those policy issues and clearly distinguish herself from Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Once she sort of comes across clearly and confidently around those issues, I think she can tap into the constituencies of the independents, the non-deciding voters, and probably some moderate Republicans as well.
Is America ready for a black female president? That's one of the big questions everybody also would like to know.
So the same question was asked just over 10 years ago when Barack Obama became a presidential candidate in U.S. politics. It was a hot question. It was being tossed back and forth. And eventually the question was answered by the competence of the candidate. So I think Kamala Harris has the pressure on her to represent future and current women in American and global politics to say, yes, we can, yes, we have the ability, yes, we must be judged on our own merits and on the basis of what we can deliver, not on the basis of gender. So it's a golden opportunity for her to actually rise the conversation.
Absolutely. Republican candidate though, Donald Trump now, despite him facing legal challenges hovering his head from the last election, he remains the favorite of many, still seeing the support that has sort of almost even grown bigger now after the incident of him, or the assassination attempt that we just recently saw. What pulls the crowd towards Trump or about Trump, especially now during this election? What makes him the favorite for many?
So American politics has been modeled around the philosophy of strength. You must come across as somebody who's strong. You must talk tough on emerging powers such as China, the Russians, India. Now we have BRICS. So American politics has been modeled along displaying that posture of coming across as strong and tough. And I think Donald Trump is naturally gifted in that terrain. He always comes across as tough negotiator, strong, and that resonates very well with the American public in general. And that's an area in which Kamala Harris needs to shape up if she wants to compete with Donald Trump, especially for the presidential debates. When she articulates policy issues, she needs to come across as tough.
The other thing is also military tactics, of course, that Donald Trump has also put up in place, and I think he also seems to want that as a bigger area that he wants to improve.
Yeah.
Compared to what Joe Biden has said in his presidential debate that he recently had before he pulled out, do you think Kamala Harris can also perhaps put up a stronger debate against that part of the military strength that the United States, of course, hold?
Yeah, I think she comes from the establishment of the Democratic Party framework, which essentially supports the American military supremacy doctrine, which would continue the current wars in which America is involved. Unfortunately, it would be a serious negative against it, because Donald Trump will be campaigning against basically the wars. He wants to end the wars, and he has actually promised the American people to end the wars. They are costing trillions of dollars. They are shedding bloodshed, and it's simply destabilizing the global order. So Kamala Harris needs to find a niche into how she's going to segregate herself from the traditional Democratic Party establishment that want to continue wars and probably start fresh ones.
Very well. All in all, in general, what are you looking out for? And of course, what is the big picture that we can see perhaps in your own analysis in the presidential debate, the presidential race of Kamala Harris and that against Donald Trump?
So the first thing that I'm really hoping would come and go fast is I know there'll be other candidates competing against for the primaries within the party. That can be divisive, it can be destructive, and it can sort of drag the party along. I hope they'll come through that phase quick and fast and pretty much really behind Kamala Harris, and then come together against Donald Trump as a united front and backhand support. I hope she's going to raise enough money, because Donald Trump has been raising good money. Biden has been outperforming Trump in the fundraising, but Kamala Harris, if she can convince the Democratic Party funders, if she articulates clearly on policy issues, if she stands a chance, the idea is that she's expected to put up, she's younger than Donald Trump, so she's expected to put up a fierce fight and speak for the women vote, and especially people of color.
Absolutely. Well, Sam, thank you so much for making the time to talk to us this morning. Of course, we can't wait to see how the developments in the United States unfold. Hopefully we get to sit down again, of course, also to talk about the developments in that area.
It's always my pleasure. We're looking forward to the contest.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure.